We are wired for connection. From the very beginning, we are shaped by the people who hold our hands and hear our stories. Vulnerability, the courage to show up, to be seen, to speak our truth even when we're trembling, is the birthplace of intimacy, creativity, and real human connection. But in the wrong hands, our softness can become a target. And that's the first and often the most dangerous sign, when someone begins to use your vulnerability as ammunition rather than a bridge. It starts small. Maybe you shared a painful story with them, a heartbreak, a childhood wound, a moment where you felt like you weren't enough. And maybe at the time, they listened. Maybe they looked you in the eye and nodded and you thought you were safe. That's the illusion. Because later, when they feel threatened or they want control or they want to hurt you, that moment you bled a little truth becomes the very thing they throw in your face. That's not intimacy. That's betrayal dressed up in familiarity. This type of person doesn't just listen, they collect. They store your emotional confessions like files. They'll act like your story matters, but what they're really doing is gathering tools. They'll wait until your back is against the wall, or maybe you're just trying to set a boundary, and suddenly your deepest truth becomes their sharpest knife. It sounds like you always play the victim, or you're just acting like your mom again, or even worse, no one else would love you if they knew what I know. These aren't slips of the tongue, they are calculated wounds, delivered with precision, designed to shatter your sense of safety. Here's the hard part. When someone uses your vulnerability against you, it doesn't just hurt, it confuses you. You start to question whether sharing in the first place was a mistake. You begin to doubt your instinct to trust, your need for connection. That internal unraveling is exactly what they want. Because the more you pull away from your sense of worth, the easier it is for them to maintain power. It's not just about hurting you, it's about disorienting you. People who weaponize vulnerability often present themselves as emotionally intelligent. They know the language of healing. They'll use words like boundaries and trauma and gaslighting, not to uplift, but to manipulate. They know what empathy is supposed to sound like, but they don't practice it. They're actors in the theater of healing, not participants. And the performance is always about control. Real relationships, the ones that nourish our souls, honor vulnerability as sacred. If someone loves you, they'll protect your story. They'll understand the weight of what you've handed them. They won't always get it right, but they'll never use your truth as a weapon. In contrast, someone who wants to destroy you will pretend to hold space, only to later weaponize what you revealed when your guard was down. So here's the invitation. Pay attention to how people hold your truth. Listen to how they speak when they're angry. Watch what they reach for when they feel threatened. Do they go for your character, your past, your wounds? Because someone who reaches for your pain when they're uncomfortable isn't loving you, they're keeping score. And people who keep score are not safe. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is clarity. It reveals who's for you and who's merely interested in your undoing. Trust what you see when your soul is laid bare, because someone who wants to destroy you will always try to convince you that you handed them the knife. 2, they rewrite reality to serve their story. There's a kind of damage that's hard to name because it doesn't leave bruises on your skin. It leaves them on your sense of self. It happens when someone slowly, skillfully bends reality around their needs until you're no longer sure what actually happened. That's the second sign you're dealing with someone who wants to destroy you. They rewrite reality to serve their story. This kind of person is a master storyteller, but only in service of self-protection or control. They can twist a conversation, reframe a moment, and even reconstruct an entire relationship history to make themselves look like the victim or the hero. What's terrifying is how believable they can be, not just to others, but to you. They don't need to shout. They don't need to lie outright. Sometimes all they need to do is shift the tone, reframe the timeline, or question your memory with enough conviction to make you wonder if you're the one who's lost. It begins subtly. You recall something painful they said. They say, I never said that, or you're too sensitive. You remember a boundary you set. They remember a guilt trip. You bring up a pattern. They insist it's all in your head. This is not simple disagreement. It's psychological erosion. Over time, they wear down your confidence in your own perception. And if they can control your version of reality, they can control your choices, your voice, and eventually your identity. What makes this so insidious is that they often do it with charm. They smile. They laugh things off. They appeal to your empathy. They say things like, I hate drama, or you always make things bigger than they are. And before long, you're apologizing for being hurt. You're shrinking your truth. You're editing yourself in real time just to avoid the shame spiral they've trained you to expect. At their core, people who rewrite reality don't want accountability. They want power. They can't afford the truth because the truth would disrupt the version of themselves they're committed to performing. So instead of facing it, they manipulate it. And if that means making you feel crazy, fragile, or ungrateful, so be it. Your confusion is just collateral damage. There's a name for this. It's called gaslighting, but even that word can feel too clinical for something so personal. This is more than manipulation. It's theft. They're not just writing a story. They're stealing your trust in yourself. They're turning your reality into a stage and you into an unreliable narrator in your own life. The way out isn't always loud. Sometimes it starts with the quiet decision to believe yourself again, to trust that what you saw, what you heard, what you felt matters. You don't need a unanimous jury to validate your truth. If something felt off, it was. If a pattern is hurting you, it's real. Healing begins where self-trust is restored. You don't owe anyone your confusion. And you're not obligated to stay in relationships where truth has to fight to breathe. Someone who wants to destroy you will never admit the damage they've done. They'll just deny it ever happened. But you don't need their permission to name your pain. You just need your own. 3. They disguise control as care. One of the most disorienting forms of harm doesn't show up as anger or cruelty. It shows up as concern. It wears the mask of love. It sounds like worry. It even looks like loyalty. But underneath, it's control. That's the third sign when someone disguises control as care. At first, it feels flattering. They're attentive, involved, maybe even a little intense. But isn't that what love looks like? They check in constantly, want to know where you are, who you're with, what you're thinking. They might say things like, I just want to make sure you're okay, or I only worry because I care. And it sounds kind, it sounds safe, until you realize that every choice you make, every boundary, every friend, every dream starts needing their approval. The shift is subtle. You start second-guessing plans that don't include them. You start minimizing your ambitions to avoid conflict. You begin editing your personality just slightly to avoid triggering their concern. And what looks like love slowly becomes a form of control, a leash wrapped in the language of protection. People who control in this way often position themselves as the expert on you. They know what's best. They understand your needs better than you do. If you resist, they'll say you're being irrational or impulsive. If you push back, they'll question your judgment. And if you dare to set a boundary, they'll say you're being distant, selfish, or ungrateful. Their care is conditional. It comes with strings attached. Strings that tighten the moment you try to breathe. This isn't love, it's possession. Real love invites freedom, growth, and individuality. Control dressed as care, on the other hand, is always about shrinking you, not to protect you, but to preserve their comfort. They don't want you strong. They want you dependent. They don't want you confident. They want you compliant. Because your independence threatens the role they've carved out for themselves, the rescuer, the protector, the one you need. And what makes this so confusing is that they often believe their own narrative. They genuinely think they're being helpful. But helpfulness without consent is manipulation. And support that punishes your autonomy isn't support at all, it's coercion. You are not ungrateful for wanting space. You're not cold for setting boundaries. You're not reckless for having a voice. To untangle this kind of control, you have to get radically honest about your own discomfort. Ask yourself, do I feel safe saying no to this person? Do I feel free to make mistakes? Do I feel trusted when I take up space? If the answer is no, then what you're experiencing isn't care. It's a performance of care that depends on your silence. The truth is, real care doesn't require you to shrink. It doesn't monitor your every move, question your every motive, or make you feel guilty for wanting a life outside of someone else's shadow. Real care is spacious. It supports your wholeness, not just the version of you that stays small enough to keep someone else comfortable. 4, they thrive in your self-doubt. Some people don't destroy you with rage, they destroy you with erosion. Slow, steady, almost invisible. One of the clearest signs that you're dealing with someone who wants to dismantle your spirit is this. They thrive in your self-doubt. They won't take your power outright. They'll convince you to give it away. These people don't need to scream or belittle you in obvious ways. Instead, they become experts at planting small seeds of uncertainty. It's in the offhand comment when you share an idea. You sure that's something you can handle? It's the subtle eye roll when you're excited about something new. It's the hesitation they inject into your confidence until you start hesitating too. They don't attack your worth head on. They just keep asking questions that make you forget it. When you begin to second guess yourself, they come alive. That's their home turf. The place where you lean on them for approval, for clarity, for validation. They'll act like they're helping you, offering feedback, just being honest. But the truth is, they don't want you to feel sure of yourself, because when you do, you don't need them anymore. And the one thing they fear most is your independence. Self-doubt makes you easier to control. If you question your decisions, you'll defer to theirs. If you question your perception, you'll believe their version of events. If you question your worth, you'll tolerate treatment that doesn't align with who you are. And the person who thrives in your self-doubt will never encourage you to see your strength clearly, because your strength threatens their control. You might start to feel like you can't make a decision without running it past them, not because they demand it outright, but because you've internalized their voice. You carry their judgment with you like a shadow. What would they say? Would they approve? Would they mock this later? You start to anticipate their reactions before they even speak. That's not intuition, that's survival mode. But this isn't about needing constant praise or blind affirmation. It's about whether your growth is celebrated or quietly resented. Someone who truly cares for you will want to see you become more of yourself, not less. They'll cheer when you take risks, support you when you fail, and remind you that your inner knowing is worth trusting. But someone who wants to destroy you, they'll undermine that knowing at every turn and call it love. It takes courage to recognize this dynamic, because by the time you do, you may feel deeply unsure of who you even are. That's the damage. That's the quiet devastation of being surrounded by someone who only feels powerful when you feel small. But the fact that you're noticing, that you're naming it, is the beginning of reclaiming your clarity. And your clarity is the antidote to their confusion. You don't owe anyone your uncertainty. Your self-trust is sacred, and anyone who seeks to dismantle it, no matter how subtly, is not safe for your spirit. You deserve relationships that hold up a mirror to your strength, not ones that blur your reflection until you forget what you look like. 5, they celebrate your collapse quietly. There's a kind of cruelty that doesn't shout. It doesn't gloat. It doesn't post about your failure or laugh in your face. It just watches silently, but with satisfaction as you unravel. That's the final sign you're dealing with someone who wants to destroy you. They celebrate your collapse quietly. This is the person who appears calm when things go wrong for you, too calm. The one who doesn't reach out when you're struggling. The one who goes silent when you need support. They might even feign concern, but there's a flicker in their eyes, a stillness in their voice that gives them away. Because while they may not openly attack you, your fall validates their hidden hopes. Your failure makes them feel safe, superior, or justified. It confirms the story they've been writing about you all along, the one where you're not as strong, not as capable, not as worthy as you seemed. People like this often frame themselves as peaceful, neutral, or even above the drama. But make no mistake, their silence isn't neutrality, it's strategy. They withhold encouragement when you rise and offer only passive indifference when you fall. Why? Because to them, your strength was always a threat. Your ambition made them insecure. Your happiness made them uncomfortable. So when the cracks show, they exhale. Quietly, of course, but deeply. And here's the painful part. Sometimes this person is someone you once trusted, a friend, a partner, even a mentor. You shared your victories with them. You brought them into your life. You believed they were rooting for you. That's what makes it hurt. Not just the betrayal, but the realization that they were never clapping when you soared. They were waiting. There's a wordless tension in relationships like these. You feel it when you succeed and they withdraw. You feel it when you're vulnerable and they seem almost satisfied. They don't need to sabotage you openly. All they need to do is step back and let the damage unfold, quietly affirming to themselves that your pain was inevitable, deserved, or overdue. Healing from this requires more than distance. It requires discernment. You must learn to notice who lights up when you shine, who stands beside you when you fall without needing you to stay broken. Because someone who wants to destroy you may never throw the first stone, but they'll watch from the shadows, hoping you don't get back up.